A hush settled over the Ascot lawns the moment word slipped through the grandstands that the Princess of Wales would not be joining the royal procession after all. One instant the order of carriages seemed set in marble, the next, reality cracked and murmurs raced along the rails like wind through tall grass. From the shaded boxes to the flower-laden paddock bars, guests exchanged puzzled glances. Catherine's absence, announced barely half an hour before the riders were due out, felt less like a logistical tweak and more like a heartbeat skipped in full public view. Yet almost as swiftly as concern rose, two familiar figures glided through the gates and steadied the mood. Kate Middleton, crisp in cream lace, and Alize Kate Middleton, radiant in dove-grey silk, stepped onto the turf with the serene confidence of women who had walked beside Catherine long before television crews learned her maiden name. Cameras found them at once, but rather than shrink from the lenses they met them head-on, smiles anchored, posture unshaken. Their very presence whispered a single, unspoken line: the princess may be resting, but her circle is intact. What precisely happened in the hours leading up to that pivot remains partly cloaked in palace discretion. Close aides had penciled Catherine into Wednesday's carriage list weeks earlier, believing that two high-profile outings, Trooping the Colour on Saturday and Garter Day on Monday, had gone well enough to justify a third. Inside the household, staff had begun to breathe a cautious sigh of relief. Then, sometime before breakfast on the morning of Ascot, the princess awoke, felt a wave of fatigue she could not simply blink away, and signaled to her medical team that something was off. Physicians, already familiar with the unpredictable rhythms that follow a course of preventive chemotherapy, advised immediate rest. Courtiers scrambled. Dresses were returned to garment bags. Hairstylists stood down, a red-lined briefing file was slid back into a locked drawer, and the princess's name quietly vanished from the procession order, only for the omission to explode across social media moments later. Within Windsor's private apartments, a ripple of alarm spread through corridors normally governed by clockwork routine. A former equerry later described the scene in a single sentence: people were pacing in circles asking why the sun had come up in the west. Ascot, after all, is no casual garden party. It is a marquee stage for understated status checking, a place where the slightest deviation from plan can morph into headlines in a heartbeat. To decline attendance so late in the morning, particularly during the 200th anniversary of the royal procession, raised more questions than any softly worded palace guidance note could quiet. From outside, speculation ran wild. Some outlets claimed Catherine had been rushed to hospital for tests, others suggested a minor infection blamed on summer pollen, still others leaned on unnamed sources who insisted the princess was simply managing energy in the wake of two demanding state events. Kensington Palace, now practiced in selective silence, declined to add color. The official line remained unchanged: day-by-day decisions, health comes first, the princess will appear when her physicians and her own awareness say she can. Behind the smokescreen, however, a more textured reality emerged. According to veteran royal correspondent Conca Colleja, Catherine had indeed experienced what doctors called a pronounced fatigue episode in the early hours. Rest at home did not relieve it. By mid-morning, with Ascot's start time ticking closer, a senior palace physician recommended observation at a clinic in West London. The transfer, carried out by unmarked vehicle, came and went unnoticed by most of the press camped at the gates. Tests were run, hydration infused, and by early afternoon the princess was reportedly stable, though advised to avoid public strain for several days. The incident echoed a pattern many oncologists recognize. Preventive chemotherapy, even when deemed successful, can leave residual vulnerabilities, sudden dips in energy, immune fluctuations, unexpected fevers. In Catherine's case, each outward triumph, the balcony wave during trooping, the gracious curtsy in St. George's Chapel, is followed by a quieter chapter unseen by cameras: protein-rich meals planned to the gram, short monitored walks through the garden, mindfulness sessions in a sun-drenched morning room. Recovery is not a linear sprint, but a stop-start pilgrimage, and the princess has learned to listen when her body whispers enough. While she rested, Ascot carried on, made unexpectedly poignant by the deputation of Middletons. Carol's hat, unmistakable to veteran fashion watchers, turned a deeper shade of symbolism when it was revealed to be the same saucer brim she had worn at Prince Louis's christening 7 summers earlier. Alizé's borrowed fascinator, also from Carol's collection, featured a gentle plume of white feathers that bobbed each time she laughed. The visual subtext was impossible to miss, the older generation lending strength, the newer generation carrying it forward, Catherine present in spirit if not in person. Not everyone inside the firm felt equally reassured. A senior lady-in-waiting, overheard that afternoon in a corridor near the Queen's apartments, murmured that the palace cannot afford another vacuum of information. Last winter's feverish speculation, fueled by weeks without photographic proof of Catherine's condition, is still fresh in institutional memory. "We owed more clarity then," she said, "and we learnt that lesson the bruising way." Yet clarity comes with its own dangers, particularly when the royal family's future hinges on 2 individuals who must pace themselves with marathon discipline. For Prince William, that means calibrating duty as though it were a medical dosage. He can chair an Earthshot summit one day, spend the next in closed briefing with economic advisors, but must still clear an entire weekend for family walks in the Norfolk dunes. "The lines on his face are deeper this year," one palace photographer remarked, "but the calm behind the eyes is deeper too." That calm is no accident. William has reportedly installed a new private secretary, with crisis management credentials forged in the Foreign Office, and decreed that no engagement goes in the diary without a fallback deputy, should he need to withdraw at an hour's notice. For Catherine, the strategy is even more granular. Nutritionists have designed anti-inflammatory menus measured down to the turmeric pinch. Her physio writes weekly mobility schedules, alternating Pilates with gentle resistance training. A discreet mindfulness coach, the same therapist who once counseled frontline NHS nurses, visits twice a month. And every potential public duty passes through what aides Riley call the traffic light algorithm: green for engagements, under 45 minutes requiring minimal standing, amber for those with controlled podium time, red for anything that might stretch past 90 minutes, or involve long outdoor exposure. Inside the media center, royal reporters whisper about the Diary of Dots, a confidential spreadsheet whose cells turn green only after Catherine's final morning health check. Some in the press corps grumble that transparency suffers, but medical advisors counter that the princess's long-term service depends on ruthless pacing now. Better 3 peak appearances a month than 10 pale, exhausting ones, a palace physician told a friend, because relapse serves no one. Amid rumors, palace sources remain adamant on one further point: the king will not abdicate. Charles III, by all credible accounts, responds well to immunotherapy. His energy has rebounded enough for him to convene weekly audiences with the Prime Minister. Still, succession planning is no longer theoretical. Quietly, a trusted quartet of advisors, 2 constitutional experts, a cybersecurity chief, and a foreign policy grandee, meet fortnightly in a Kensington drawing room to game out transition scenarios. Among their tasks, ensuring a seamless lift and shift of Catherine's early childhood foundation into a structure ready for queenly scale, drafting protocols for future Earthshot engagements to avoid overlap with government climate negotiations, and mapping support pathways should the princess experience another health setback once she is princess consort. Far from morbid, insiders call this preparation pragmatic. "The monarchy is a relay race," says historian Sarah Gruen, "and baton changes cannot be improvised on the day." The late Queen's example looms large. She began quietly coaching Charles in statecraft during the 1990s. Today Charles does the same with William, who in turn shields Catherine from overload, so she can one day step onto the world stage at full strength. None of this means immediate upheaval. For now, Catherine's next public outing remains penciled, not inked, for late summer, a low-key engagement with a neonatal research unit whose work dovetails with her early years campaign. The palace will not confirm until 48 hours beforehand, and that uncertainty is the new normal. In the meantime, Carol Middleton's appearance at Ascot lingers in the collective memory, a mother curating calm, an aunt by marriage lending sparkle, and a silent promise that, even when the Princess of Wales must retreat, her story is carried forward by people who love her not for crowns or headlines, but for the private spirit the public rarely sees. And so the House of Windsor advances, a fraction slower, a measure wiser, with recovery calendars pinned beside coronation roadmaps. The grandstands will fill again next season, Ascot's band will strike its opening march. Whether Catherine steps out in that moment depends on healing more than scheduling. One thing, though, is fixed. When she does, an entire lattice of family devotion and strategic foresight will be in place, quiet, steadfast, ready, ensuring that the future queen walks onto the stage not alone, but borne up by a strength that began, quite visibly, with her mother's steady smile amid the murmurs of a June afternoon.